Story number one, Elon Musk goes thermonuclear. As of this morning, Monday morning, Elon Musk has said he will be filing a thermonuclear suit against liberal hack attack dog Media Matters. This is for defamation and fraud and organizing an ad campaign boycott that manifested in Disney, Warner Brothers, Discovery, Comcast, NBC Universal, Lionsgate, Paramount, and IBM all pulling their ads off of X on Thursday and Friday of last week in almost a coordinated propaganda push. These big advertisers bent to the characterization of Media Matters that Twitter or X had become an anti-Semitic cesspool. It's best characterized by, far from objective, but rather propaganda rag entertainment magazine Variety, that they characterize the issue as such. Quote, Elon Musk's support of an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory has been confirmed by a, quote, research company. And that muscle, that threat, has manifested first in an ad boycott, and now it looks like, in turn, a thermonuclear lawsuit. Now, the thing that is so valuable about X is our ability to see the truth. But you don't get to see the truth without looking through the ugliness. That is the truth, that it is often an ugly truth. You have to be able to wade through falsehoods. You have to be able to endure offense. You have to be able to brush off hatefulness in order to pay the price for the opportunity to know the truth. If there is a walled garden or a guarded fortress where the sentries that stand out front are the ones charged with protecting you from hateful speech, but then also deciding what is factual, you will never get to see the truth. I think maybe the best example of that is the revelation of late last week of the January 6th tapes. House Speaker Mike Johnson, fulfilling a promise of his predecessor, Kevin McCarthy, has released the full 40,000 hours of tapes around January 6th. Now, the picture that has probably been formed in your mind, the picture that has been splayed across CNN and the New York Times, is that what occurred on January 6th was nothing short of an attempted coup, an insurrection. Now, what did occur on January 6th was a riot, a condemnable event with vandalism and verbal threats, with many unruly individuals making their way into the Capitol. But that characterization is incomplete. It's not the full story. And in fact, once you have a chance to begin to see a few other hours of the 40,000 hours of tape, you begin to wonder if that's not an exaggeration, if it's not hyperventilating, if not you've been manipulated. These other tapes that have now been released from January 6th show people calmly entering the Capitol, casually walking down the hallways, saying hello to Capitol Police as they pass. In some cases, walking through doors opened by the Capitol Police. Now, that doesn't negate the ugliness, the violence, the riot in other parts of the Capitol. But it certainly, what it does is give you a fuller picture into something that has been described as solely, exclusively, and only as an insurrection. If you were even to mention that you think maybe it's not an insurrection, that it more fully amounted to or was more accurately described as a riot, well, then you were described as a threat to democracy. And this characterization, this exaggeration of a coup has manifested in people sitting in prisons in Washington, D.C., January 6th protesters, that it's pretty fair to say in many cases have been denied the normal course of due process in the United States of America. And even worse, it's resulted in at least 5 January 6th defendants committing suicide, either because of the hopelessness of their legal situation or the characterization of them as insurrectionists. Now, listen, I want to reiterate, probably for the third time in this conversation, that there were some ridiculously over the top and criminal behavior that took place on January 6th. But the matter of debate is whether or not that is, again, the only offering on the menu for descriptions of January 6th. Because these new 40,000 hours of tape suggest there's more to the story. And that part of the story can't just be dismissed because the other stuff we saw was in part true. There are other aspects of this story that are also true. And everyone is being treated under the same characterization as an insurrectionist. Let's return to Elon Musk. Media Matters is a liberal hack attack dog that, in a more charitable description, is often described as a media watchdog. In a completely fictionalized and propagandist description, as in that of Variety, Media Matters is described as a research company. Media Matters is a far-left nonprofit funded by, in no small part, George Soros, whose explicit purpose is to monitor conservative media, and in most cases, horrifically distort things that are said on air, publish articles of these distortions, and then use those distortions as muscle against advertisers, thus depriving conservative media of potential revenue. Angelo Caruso, the leader of Media Matters, brags in his own profile of leading ad boycotts against Glenn Beck, of leading ad boycotts against Bill O'Reilly, of leading ad boycotts against Tucker Carlson, of leading ad boycotts against Fox News. This is a powerful, although corrupt, a powerful institution in attempting to silence free speech through manipulation, fraud, lies, by depriving a media company of revenue. What have they alleged against Elon Musk? They have alleged that he has participated in an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory and that he has hosted pro-Nazi propaganda on X that no respectable advertiser would ever be content to see their brand associated. Media Matters put together, in Elon Musk's characterization, a contrived account separate from their Media Matters account, where they curated content, white nationalist, racist, pro-Nazi content. And then once they had that feed curated, created by them, they refreshed their feed, in some cases as many as, I don't know how many times, but served ads, according to Elon Musk, and apparently, I would assume, his deep dive into the algorithm behind X, 13 times more than a normal account, in order to increase the probability that you would get an ad from Apple showing up against their curated feed of pro-Nazi speech, pro-Nazi propaganda, pro-Nazi posts. And by doing so, then they could take a screenshot and use it to shame, to threaten, to muscle big advertisers on X. There's also some suggestions out there that perhaps some of these examples of ads appearing next to ugly, hateful tweets were, in fact, photoshopped. Musk, for his part, says after looking at the algorithm, even though they refreshed the feed some 13 times, the normal number of times an ad would be subjected to content, in order to get one of these big advertisers to appear next to one of these tweets, he can see that in most of these cases, those hateful tweets were actually only seen by 1, 2, or 3 people. And one of those people seeing the ads was the account owner. So you're talking about not just negligible, but almost non-existent impressions for advertisers against this hateful speech. Musk goes on to say that any type of genocidal content, he gives 2 examples, anybody saying from the river to the sea, genocidal against Jews. He also said anyone using the term decolonization, which he said is a genocidal term against whites, would be banned from Twitter. But in order to protect free speech, he laid out the case that we're going to have to protect offensive and even hateful speech. It's the only sentry to put at the outskirts of the fortress. There's no one that you can entrust to decide what is racist, what is anti-Semitic. His critics contend that Elon Musk, in fact, has been anti-Semitic. Why is that? Because there was a post of, I believe, an unknown or little-known user saying something to the extent that many prominent Jewish groups have indulged the same type of dichotomy of blaming so many things on hateful whites that is now being wielded against them in anti-Semitic speech when it comes to these pro-Hamas, pro-Palestinian groups today. Elon Musk replied in response to that user, "You have said an actual truth." This sort of set off the anti-Semitic firestorm. Musk went on to clarify, I'm not talking about all Jewish people having curried this anti-white environment. But he said groups like the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, have for years endorsed this view that anything Western or white is inherently oppressive or racist. And as such, they've laid the groundwork for this to be used against them as a weapon in anti-Semitic speech. Now, Elon Musk is certainly out there in having a conversation that's not being had on very many forums. And he was defended by the likes of Ben Shapiro of the Daily Wire and famous investor Bill Ackman, saying Elon Musk is not anti-Semitic. And in fact, he is right about the way that many of these groups on the left, including the Anti-Defamation League, have laid the groundwork for where they arrive at today by not just indulging, but fostering anti-white rhetoric for many years. It's also clearly an attack on free speech. No one cared about old Twitter, these advertisers. Disney, Discovery, Lionsgate didn't seem to care about old Twitter when they were very quick to censor conservative speech, but very slow in at all addressing child pornography. That did not inspire an ad boycott from IBM. What more, this concern over anti-Semitism doesn't seem to have bled over to what most are characterizing as rampant anti-Semitic speech on TikTok, on Facebook, on Instagram. No. It's isolated to X. What that means is essentially you're giving away the game. The concern is not over anti-Semitism. The concern is over unfettered speech, because unfettered speech represents a threat to power. There's been an ideological stranglehold on power in mainstream media and social media through the government for the better part of half a decade. And it's been wielded. It's been wielded, no doubt, to swing a presidential election. I give you, as just one example, the censorship of the story over Hunter Biden's laptop. But what is now under threat in this boycott is in response to the threat not of hateful speech, but of the potential loss of that ideological stranglehold on power. And that takes us back to the January 6th tapes, something that was controlled, curated, manipulated by the likes of Adam Kinzinger and Liz Cheney through the mainstream media channels, where you were only allowed to see a part of the picture. Now, I don't know exactly how to characterize the full events of January 6th, but I know that I've been given a manipulated, exaggerated, hyperbolic description and vision, a slice of the pie of what happened on January 6th. Does that change the outcome? Does that change our judgment of that day? Well, not until we know the answer to some questions that existed then, and some questions that are only more valid today after being exposed to the 40,000 hours from January 6th. Questions like, why was this information hidden? Why was this not part of the January 6th Inquisition on Capitol Hill? Does there need to be a new Inquisition investigation into January 6th? Why? Why would you form such an extreme characterization at the detriment of a fuller, more truthful picture? If you only tell me part of a story, I begin to question whether the veracity of that story and your motivations for not sharing with me the other parts of that story. How much of what happened on January 6th was instigated by government agents? There have been credible, not just allegations, but questions asked from United States senators to Capitol Police, to the FBI, about whether or not the FBI had people in the crowd that day, whether or not there were federal agents in the masses around the Capitol on January 6th. How many, if any, feds were involved that day at the Capitol? These questions not only remain, these questions remain important because we know now we have been given a partial picture. Now we need a full picture. And that is the only way we arrive at the truth. That is what we have the best chance of achieving on X. A full, unfettered forum for free speech. And that is why we'll be watching as Elon Musk goes thermonuclear. Hey, it's Will Cain. Click here to subscribe to the Fox News channel on YouTube. It's the best way to get our latest interviews and highlights. And click to subscribe to the Will Cain podcast for full episodes right now.